I'm Michelle, 29 female. I live in a small but cozy apartment in the city with my partner, Alex. By day, I'm a librarian, surrounded by the quiet hum of knowledge, but my personal life has recently felt like a drama I never auditioned for. It all came to a head at one single, unforgettable family dinner. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The dread always started about a week in advance. It was a low-frequency hum in the back of my mind, a tightening in my stomach that grew more insistent with each passing day. It was the signal that the quarterly mandatory family dinner, as I'd grimly nicknamed it, was approaching. Hosted by my Uncle Robert at his meticulously kept suburban home, it was less a celebration of kinship and more a tribunal where life choices were silently, and sometimes not so silently, judged. This time, the dread was laced with a particular strain of anxiety, because I was bringing Alex. Alex was the calm center of my universe. With his steady hands, often smudged with soil, and his quiet, confident smile, he had a way of grounding me that felt like coming home. We'd been together for 2 years, and in that time, he had rebuilt my idea of what partnership could be. He was kind, patient, and intensely passionate about his work. Alex was an urban farmer. He didn't just grow vegetables, he cultivated community. He ran a nonprofit initiative called City Sprouts, a sprawling network of rooftop and vacant lot gardens that supplied fresh, organic produce to local restaurants and, more importantly, to underserved neighborhoods through a community-supported agriculture (CSA) program. To me, he was a hero, quietly changing a small piece of the world. To my family, however, his profession was a source of confusion and, for some, thinly veiled pity. Their world was one of corporate ladders, billable hours, and measurable profit margins. A man who worked with dirt for a living didn't compute. The primary arbiter of this judgment was my cousin, Tiffany. We were the same age, 29, but existed in different galaxies. Tiffany was a social media influencer, a curator of a life that appeared flawless through a Valencia filter. Her Instagram feed was a curated stream of brand-sponsored trips to Dubai, unboxings of designer handbags she received for free, and selfies with a smile so bright it looked like it was powered by a separate generator. She measured worth in followers, likes, and the price tags of the things she owned. To Tiffany, Alex's profession wasn't just odd, it was a failure. She saw his flannel shirts and work boots not as practical attire for his job, but as evidence of his lack of ambition and, by extension, my poor judgment in choosing him. Uncle Robert, her father, was a more complex case. A retired accountant, he was a man who lived by the numbers. He was quiet, pragmatic, and respected a healthy balance sheet above all else. He wasn't malicious like Tiffany, but he was susceptible to her narrative. He saw Alex through a lens of financial liability. He'd make comments like, "Is that farming thing of his, sustainable, Michelle?" The subtext was always clear. Is he providing for you? Is he a good investment? I knew he cared about my happiness, but his definition of it was inextricably linked to financial security. So, as I stood in my closet that Sunday evening, I wasn't just picking out a dress. I was choosing my armor. I settled on a simple, elegant navy blue dress, modest enough to avoid comment, but sharp enough to feel confident. Alex walked in, wiping his hands on a towel. He'd just come from watering the greenhouse on the roof of our building. "You ready for the gauntlet?" he asked, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He knew, he always knew. "As I'll ever be," I sighed, turning to face him. "Are you sure you're okay with this? You don't have to come, I can make an excuse." He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around my waist, pulling me close. He smelled like fresh mint and damp earth. "And let you face the dragon alone? Not a chance. Besides," he added, a playful glint in his eye, "I hear your Uncle Robert is making his famous pot roast. I'll endure 1,000 of Tiffany's condescending questions for a slice of that." I laughed, the knot in my stomach loosening just a little. "It's not you, it's me. I hate the way they look at you, the way she talks to you." "Hey," he said softly, tilting my chin up. Her opinion doesn't pay our rent, it doesn't water the seedlings, it doesn't make me happy. You do, what she thinks is just noise. He was right, of course. But the noise was harder to ignore when it was coming from across a dinner table, amplified by the clinking of silverware and the weight of family expectation. The drive to Uncle Robert's house was filled with a comfortable silence. We listened to an old folk album, watching the city lights give way to the sprawling, identical houses of the suburbs. Each manicured lawn and two-car garage felt like a set piece in a play I was forced to act in. As we pulled into the driveway, my heart did a familiar lurch. Tiffany's car was already there, a gleaming white luxury SUV that looked more like a spaceship than a vehicle. It was parked at a slight angle, taking up just a little too much space, a perfect metaphor for her personality. "Deep breath," Alex said, squeezing my hand before we got out. "We're a team." I nodded, took a deep, fortifying breath, and plastered a smile on my face. Showtime. We walked up the stone pathway, the scent of pot roast and Tiffany's expensive perfume already wafting out the open door. Uncle Robert greeted us with a firm, dry handshake for Alex and a slightly worried look for me. "Michelle, good to see you." "Alex." "Good to see you too, Uncle Robert. Smells incredible," Alex said with genuine warmth. "Ah, yes, the pot roast," he said, a flicker of pride in his eyes. And then, Tiffany emerged from the living room, a glass of champagne in her hand, looking like she'd just stepped out of a magazine shoot. She wore a silk jumpsuit that probably cost more than our monthly grocery bill. "Michelle, you made it," she chirped, air-kissing the space beside my cheek. Her eyes immediately flicked to Alex, her gaze sweeping over him from head to toe. It was a practiced, dismissive appraisal that took in his simple button-down shirt and clean, but worn, leather shoes. "And Alex, so good of you to come." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. The gauntlet had begun. The living room was Uncle Robert's pride and joy. It was filled with dark wood furniture, leather-bound books that looked like they had never been opened, and framed photos of Tiffany at various life stages. Tiffany at her graduation, Tiffany on a yacht, Tiffany with a minor celebrity. It was a shrine to a life of curated success. We settled onto a stiff sofa that felt like it was designed to discourage lounging, and the interrogation began, masked as casual conversation. "So, Alex," Tiffany started, swirling her champagne. She always started with Alex. It was her way of establishing the hierarchy, of putting him in his place from the outset. "How is the gardening thing going? Still playing in the dirt?" I felt a familiar flash of heat in my cheeks. Alex, however, remained unruffed. "It's going well, thanks," he said pleasantly. "We just secured a new rooftop space downtown. It's going to double our kale and tomato output for the season." "Kale," Tiffany repeated, the word dripping with disdain. She took a delicate sip of her drink. "How fascinating. I just got back from Milan, you know. The fashion week there is just a whole other world. The fabrics, the designs, it's where real culture is happening. But I suppose growing kale is important too, in its own way." It was a masterclass in condescension. The poison praise. The implication was clear. His world was small, grubby, and insignificant, while hers was global, glamorous, and important. I opened my mouth to say something sharp, but Alex shot me a look, a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of his head. "Not worth it," his eyes said. Uncle Robert, ever the pragmatist, chimed in. "Is there good money in that, son? In kale?" "The business is sustainable," Alex answered, choosing his words carefully. "We operate as a nonprofit, so the goal isn't massive profit, but we have a strong operational budget. We're well-funded through grants and our CSA subscriptions." Tiffany let out a little laugh, a sound like tiny shards of glass. "Grants. Oh, that's sweet, like a charity. It's so wonderful you have a little hobby that keeps you busy." She turned to me, her expression shifting to one of mock sympathy. "And you, Michelle, you're just a saint for supporting him. It must be tough, with you being the primary breadwinner on a librarian's salary. I honestly don't know how you two manage. My new condo fees alone are probably more than your rent." The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. She had finally said the quiet part out loud, laying the family's core judgment bare on the coffee table next to the cheese platter. The accusation was twofold: that Alex was a financial failure, and that I was a fool for being with him. My jaw was so tight I could feel a headache starting behind my eyes. I looked at Alex, expecting to see him hurt or angry, but he just had a calm, almost curious expression on his face, as if he were observing a strange new species of insect. His serenity was infuriating and inspiring all at once. "We do just fine, Tiffany," I said, my voice dangerously level. "We're very happy. Our finances aren't really a topic for public discussion." "Oh, of course not," she said, raising her hands in mock surrender. "I'm just concerned. You're my cousin. I want you to have the best. You work so hard at that dusty old library. You deserve a man who can treat you to a trip to Milan, not just a basket of organic radishes." Before I could unleash the torrent of angry words bubbling in my throat, Uncle Robert cleared his throat. "Dinner's ready," he announced, saving us all from the impending explosion. "Let's move to the dining room." The dining table was no safer. It was just a new stage for the same play. The pot roast was, as promised, delicious, but every bite I took tasted like resentment. Tiffany dominated the conversation, regaling us with exaggerated stories of her influencer life. She talked about the unbearable pressure of creating content, the drama with another influencer over a brand deal, and the exhausting task of deciding which of the five-star resorts in Bali she should visit next. Uncle Robert listened with a proud smile, occasionally asking a question that would allow her to boast even more. "How many followers do you have now, sweetie?" "Just crossed the 2 million mark, Daddy," she said, beaming. "It's a lot of work to keep that many people engaged." Through it all, Alex ate his dinner with a quiet dignity that seemed to infuriate Tiffany even more. Her inability to get a rise out of him was a challenge to her power. So, she turned her focus back to his perceived income, the one subject she felt gave her undeniable superiority. "You know," she said, leaning forward conspiratorially, as if sharing a juicy piece of gossip, "my friend just hired a landscaper, and the things he was saying about his income, it's really a struggle. He barely makes minimum wage some months." She paused, letting the implication hang in the air, then looked at Alex with a saccharine smile. "It just makes me appreciate people like you so much more. Doing what you love, even if it doesn't pay the bills. It's very noble." That was it. The final, unbearable jab. She wasn't just insulting him. She was creating a fictional narrative of his struggle and then pitying him for it. She was painting a picture for her father of a man who was, in her eyes, little more than a charity case, a financial dependent my meager salary had to support. I put my fork down. The clatter seemed to echo in the room. I looked at Tiffany, my eyes cold. "You have absolutely no idea what you're talking about." Tiffany's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "I'm just saying." "No," I cut her off. "You're not just saying. You're being rude and presumptuous. You know nothing about Alex's work or our life." The tension snapped. Uncle Robert looked between us, his fork hovering over his plate. Alex placed a calming hand on my knee under the table. Now, girls," Uncle Robert said weakly. "Let's not argue." "I'm not arguing," Tiffany sniffed, regaining her composure. "I'm simply making an observation. It's a fact that some jobs just don't pay well. It's not a judgment, it's just economics." She looked at her father, seeking validation. He gave a slight, uncomfortable nod. I felt a wave of despair wash over me. It wasn't just Tiffany. It was the whole value system she represented, a system that had infected my own family. They couldn't see the value in Alex's work because it didn't come with a flashy car or a designer logo. His worth was invisible to them. The rest of the meal passed in a strained, chilly silence, punctuated only by the sound of silverware on porcelain. Tiffany looked smug, convinced she had won the round. I just wanted to disappear. I picked at my food, the delicious pot roast now tasting like ash in my mouth. I couldn't wait for the night to be over. I had no idea that it was, in fact, just getting started. Dessert was a tense affair. Uncle Robert served a homemade apple pie. his go-to peace offering, but the atmosphere was too thick to be sweetened by cinnamon and baked apples. Tiffany was on her phone, probably scrolling through her own perfect life to reinforce her sense of superiority. Alex and I were making the kind of polite, meaningless small talk that signals a desperate desire to leave. I was mentally calculating the earliest possible moment we could escape without appearing overtly rude when Uncle Robert did something that changed the entire course of the evening, and indeed, our family dynamic forever. Bored by Tiffany's self-absorption and the palpable tension, he picked up the remote control from the sideboard. "Let's get the news on," he mumbled, more to himself than anyone else. "See what's happening in the real world." He switched on the large flat-screen TV mounted on the dining room wall. The local Channel 8 evening news broadcast filled the room, the familiar face of the lead anchor, Brenda Walsh, giving a summary of the day's headlines. A fire downtown, a political debate at City Hall, a traffic update. It was the usual litany of urban life, and it served as a kind of neutral background noise. Tiffany glanced up from her phone, rolled her eyes at the screen, and went back to her scrolling. I felt a wave of relief. The focus was off us. We could finish our pie, say our thank yous, and flee into the night. "And now, for our top story," Brenda Walsh said, her tone shifting to one of importance. "Tonight, the city honors its best and brightest at the annual Mayor's Community Impact Awards. This prestigious event recognizes the citizens and organizations making a real difference in our community. We go now live to our reporter, David Chen, who is at the Grand Plaza Hotel." The screen cut to a reporter standing in a glittering ballroom. People in formal attire mingled in the background, their chatter a low hum beneath his voice. "Thanks, Brenda," the reporter said. "The energy here is electric. The mayor just finished his speech, and the final, most anticipated award of the night has just been announced. The Innovator for a Better City Award, which comes with a substantial grant to fund the winner's future work, is the highest honor given this evening." Uncle Robert leaned forward slightly, his interest piqued. He loved civic affairs and stories of local success, as long as they fit his definition of it. The camera panned across the stage, where the mayor stood at a podium, holding a large, gleaming glass trophy. "This year's winner," the reporter's voice continued, "is a man whose vision is transforming the landscape of our city, both literally and figuratively. He's tackling food insecurity and building a more sustainable future, one rooftop at a time. The award goes to the founder of the City Sprouts initiative, Mr. Alex Peterson." Time seemed to slow down. On the screen, in crystal clear high definition, was Alex. Not my Alex in his comfortable flannel shirt, but an Alex in a sharp, perfectly fitted dark suit and tie. He looked handsome, confident, and completely at ease as he walked across the stage to a wave of thunderous applause from the assembled crowd. He shook the mayor's hand, smiling warmly as he accepted the heavy glass award. My own fork, which had been hovering over my plate, clattered onto the china with a sharp clink, but I barely heard it. My eyes were glued to the screen. I knew about the award nomination, of course. Alex had told me a few weeks ago, but he'd been so casual about it, so convinced he wouldn't win, that I had largely put it out of my mind. "It's just an honor to be nominated," he'd said with a shrug. "There are some amazing people up for it." The mayor was speaking at the podium, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "Alex Peterson and City Sprouts represent the very best of our city's spirit. His program has not only created a sustainable source of fresh food for thousands in our most vulnerable communities, but it has also secured a 7-figure private investment partnership to expand its operations citywide. This isn't just charity. This is a revolutionary business model for social good. He's a true innovator, and we are incredibly proud to honor him tonight." 7-figure private investment. The words hung in the air, seeming to shimmer in the light of the television. The camera zoomed in on Alex as he stepped up to the microphone. "Thank you, Mr. Mayor." His voice, calm and steady, filled the silent dining room. "I'm deeply honored. This award doesn't just belong to me. It belongs to our incredible team of volunteers, our community partners, and every single person who believes that a better, greener, and more equitable city is possible. He was incredible. He was poised, articulate, and passionate. He was the man I knew and loved, but he was also a version of himself that I realized I, too, had been underestimating. I saw him every day in his work clothes, tired but happy after a long day of physical labor. I hadn't fully grasped the scale of what he had built. It was only when the camera panned back to the reporter that I became aware of the scene around me. The silence in the room was no longer just tense, it was absolute. It was a vacuum, devoid of air, sound, and movement. I turned my head slowly and took in the tableau. It was a moment frozen in time, a photograph of pure shock. And it was a sight I would cherish for the rest of my life. Uncle Robert was leaning so far forward in his chair he was practically on the table. His glasses had slipped down his nose, and his mouth was hanging slightly ajar. The pragmatic accountant, the man who lived by numbers, was trying to process a number he couldn't comprehend: 7 figures. His entire perception of Alex, built on a foundation of flannel shirts and bags of kale, had just been demolished by a television broadcast. But the true masterpiece of the scene was Tiffany. She was frozen solid, her perfectly manicured hand holding her dessert fork midair, a small piece of apple pie balanced on the tines. Her face, usually a mask of smug confidence, was utterly, completely blank. Her jaw, which had been so quick to dispense judgment, was slack. Her eyes, eyed and unblinking, were fixed on the screen, reflecting the image of the man she had just dismissed as a minimum-wage charity case. The expensive silk of her jumpsuit seemed to wilt around her. For the first time since I'd known her, Tiffany was speechless. The sound that finally broke the spell was the soft, almost comical plop of the piece of pie falling from her fork onto the pristine white tablecloth. It was followed by the louder, more definitive clatter of the fork itself as it slipped from her nerveless fingers and hit her plate. The sound of dropped silverware. It was the sound of an entire worldview shattering. "Is that?" Uncle Robert started, his voice a hoarse whisper. He turned from the TV to look at Alex, who was sitting there calmly, a small, wry smile playing on his lips. Then he looked at me. "Isn't that him?" I just smiled. I didn't need to say a word. I just took a slow, deliberate sip of my water, savoring the moment like a fine wine. On the screen, the awards ceremony was wrapping up. The reporter was signing off, and the broadcast cut back to the studio. But no one in the room was watching anymore. All eyes were on Alex. Tiffany finally found her voice, though it was a strange, high-pitched squeak, completely alien to her usual smooth, modulated tone. "What was that?" "That was the Mayor's Community Impact Awards," Alex replied, his voice even and calm. He took a bite of his own pie as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. "No, I mean you," she stammered, pointing a trembling finger at the now darkened screen. "On the TV, with the mayor. The money, what did he say? A 7-figure investment." "That's right," Alex said simply. Uncle Robert sank back into his chair, looking dazed. He ran a hand over his face. I had no idea," he said, looking at Alex with a completely new expression. It wasn't pity or confusion, it was respect. Awe even. "Son, that's incredible. Truly." "Thank you, Robert," Alex said with a nod. "I appreciate that." Tiffany, however, was still struggling to reboot her system. Her brain was like a computer that had been fed a line of code it couldn't process. Her reality was based on a simple equation: wealth equals designer clothes, luxury cars, and exotic vacations. Wealth did not equal dirt, vegetables, and nonprofits. The two concepts were, in her mind, mutually exclusive. She was getting a blue screen of death right at the dinner table. "But you're a farmer," she said, the words coming out as a confused accusation. "You wear work boots. You grow things." "I do," Alex agreed. "And City Sprouts is a non-profit organization, but it's also a highly successful social enterprise. The grant and the investment partnership are because our model is scalable and financially self-sustaining. We're proving that you can do good and do well at the same time." He delivered the line without a hint of arrogance, stating it as a simple fact. The silence returned, but this time it was different. It was a silence filled with frantic recalculations and dawning realizations. Every snide comment, every backhanded compliment, every pitying look Tiffany had directed at Alex just an hour before was now replaying in the air, cringe-inducing and utterly humiliating. She had spent the entire evening mocking a man who was, by any meaningful metric, and even by her own shallow ones, wildly more successful than she was. Her 2 million followers and free handbags suddenly seemed pathetically small in comparison to a 7-figure investment, and the honor of being named the city's top innovator. I looked at Alex and he caught my eye. He gave me a subtle wink, a private acknowledgement of the beautiful, karmic absurdity of the moment. I had wanted to defend him all night, to fight back against their ignorance. But it turned out I didn't have to. The truth had done it for me, not with a shout, but with the quiet authority of a news report, broadcast for the entire city, and one very shocked dining room to see. The best defense, it turned out, was a life well lived. And the sound of my cousin's humiliation was the sweetest dessert I could have ever imagined. The initial shockwave had passed, leaving a strange, buzzing energy in its wake. The air was thick with unspoken questions and revised opinions. Uncle Robert, the retired accountant, was the first to fully recover, his mind naturally gravitating towards the tangible data he had just been given. "A 7-figure investment," he repeated, shaking his head in disbelief. He looked at Alex as if seeing him for the first time. "That's not just seed money. That's a major vote of confidence from the private sector. Who's the investor, if you don't mind me asking? Is it a venture capital firm?" This was Uncle Robert's way of connecting. He was trying to fit Alex into a framework he understood, translating community gardens into capital and social enterprise. Alex, ever gracious, decided to meet him half. "Way, it's a consortium, actually," he explained, leaning forward slightly. "Led by the Green Future Foundation, but with significant backing from a tech CEO who's focusing on sustainable urban development. They see our model's potential for national expansion." Uncle Robert's eyes widened. "Green Future? I know them. They don't invest in anything that doesn't have a rock-solid 5-year growth plan. My goodness, Alex, this is Premier League." I watched this exchange with a quiet sense of victory. Alex wasn't just being accepted, he was being admired and on their terms. He was speaking their language, the language of finance, investment, and growth. Tiffany, however, was still stuck. Her mind was frantically trying to reconcile the man she had mocked with the man being lauded by the mayor. She couldn't attack him anymore, so she pivoted, trying to absorb his success into her own world, to reframe it in a way that made sense to her. "Well," she began, her voice still a little shaky, but regaining some of its familiar, cloying sweetness. "Why on earth didn't you say something, Alex? All this time, we thought you were just struggling." The audacity of the question was breathtaking. She was trying to shift the blame, to imply that they had been misled, that he was at fault for their ignorance. I felt that familiar fire return, but before I could speak, Alex handled it with an elegance I could only admire. He looked directly at Tiffany, his gaze open and honest. "I did say something," he said calmly. "I told you I ran a nonprofit. I told you we were expanding. I told you I was passionate about my work. The details of our funding and our balance sheet didn't seem like appropriate dinner conversation." He paused, letting the gentle rebuke land. "My work isn't about the money, Tiffany. The investment is a tool. It allows us to help more people. That's the part that matters to me." His response was a quiet checkmate. He wasn't aggressive, but he was clear. He drew a firm line between his values and hers. But this was my moment, too. For 2 years, I had quietly endured their condescension. I had absorbed their pitying looks and their backhanded compliments. I had defended Alex in private, but I had always tried to keep the peace in public. Not anymore. The truth was out, and I was going to make sure they understood it in its entirety. It was time to set the record straight, not just for Alex, but for myself. I placed my hand on Alex's arm, a gesture of solidarity. "Let me be perfectly clear," I said, my voice steady and firm, commanding the attention of both Tiffany and her father. "Alex has never been struggling, not for a single day that I've known him." I turned my gaze to Tiffany. "You see his work clothes and the dirt under his nails and you make assumptions. You see nonprofit and you hear no money. You've never once asked a genuine question about what he actually does. You just saw what you wanted to see, someone you could feel superior to." Tiffany flushed a deep, blotchy red. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" I pressed on, not raising my voice but sharpening its edge. "Let me tell you what he does. He manages a team of 20 full-time staff and over 100 volunteers. He negotiates land use contracts with the city. He develops proprietary agricultural technology to maximize yields in small spaces. He has built, from nothing, an organization that feeds over 2,000 families a month. Families who can't afford the organic kale you find so fascinating." I let that sink in, then turned to Uncle Robert. "And as for the finances, Uncle, since that's what seems to matter most here, Alex doesn't take a huge salary, that's true. He reinvests most of it back into the company. But his personal income from his advisory role on the board of 2 other national sustainability projects is more than comfortable. We are not, and have never been, struggling. We own our apartment, we have no debt, and we have a very healthy savings account. Not that it's any of your business." The room was utterly silent again, but this was a different kind of quiet. It was the quiet of a courtroom after the final, damning evidence has been presented. I had laid out the facts, dismantled their narrative, and exposed the shallow foundation of their judgment. I wasn't angry anymore. I felt light. The burden of their opinion, a weight I hadn't even fully realized I was carrying, had been lifted. I wasn't the poor cousin with the charity case boyfriend anymore. I was the partner of one of the city's most respected innovators, and I had finally claimed that truth as my own. Alex squeezed my hand under the table. He didn't say anything, but his eyes were shining with pride. He had never needed me to defend him, but in that moment, he was glad that I had for me. The silence was finally broken by Uncle Robert, who cleared his throat and looked down at his plate, unable to meet my eye. "Well," he said softly, "it seems we've misjudged things. I apologize, Michelle, and to you, Alex." It was a start, but from Tiffany, there was only a stony, humiliated silence. The record had been set straight, and she had no rebuttal. The rest of the evening was an exercise in exquisite awkwardness. The main event was over, and now we were all left to sit amongst the wreckage of Tiffany's ego. The atmosphere she had so carefully curated, one of her own effortless superiority, had evaporated, replaced by a thick, unpalatable humility. She was visibly scrambling, her influencer-trained mind searching for an angle, a way to spin this, a way to salvage her image in the room. After a long, painful silence, she finally landed on a new tactic: bandwagoning. If you can't beat them, join them and pretend you were on their side all along. "Wow," she said, forcing a bright, brittle smile. "I mean, that is just so amazing, Alex, amazing." She drew the word out, infusing it with a synthetic enthusiasm that was painful to witness. "You know, my brand is all about authenticity and positive impact. We are so aligned. I have like a huge platform. We should totally collaborate." She leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with a desperate, opportunistic light. "I could do a whole series of posts about city sprouts. Imagine the exposure. Influencer gets her hands dirty for a good cause. We could get you so many more volunteers, so much more buzz. We could even design a cute line of city sprouts gardening gloves. The branding possibilities are endless." It was, in its own way, a masterpiece of self-absorption. Even in her attempt to praise him, she had made it all about herself, her brand, her platform. She didn't see a community project, she saw content. She didn't see a mission, she saw a marketing opportunity. Alex, who had been patient and gracious all evening, finally let a hint of weariness show. He gave her a polite but firm smile. "I appreciate the offer, Tiffany, but I don't think that would be a good fit for us." "What? Why not?" she asked, genuinely baffled. The idea that someone would turn down the gift of her exposure was a foreign concept. Our work isn't about buzz or branding, Alex explained patiently. We're a community-focused organization. Our success comes from building real, on-the-ground relationships, not from social media campaigns. Our message is in the food we grow and the people we help. To be honest, a fashion influencer suddenly promoting our work might send the wrong message. It could seem inauthentic. He used her own favorite buzzword against her, and it was a verbal dart that hit its mark perfectly. Inauthentic. For an influencer, it was the ultimate insult. Tiffany recoiled as if she'd been slapped. Inauthentic? I am the most authentic. She stopped, realizing she had nowhere to go with that argument. The entire evening had been a testament to her profound inauthenticity. She slumped back in her chair, defeated. The last of her strategies had failed. She couldn't mock him, she couldn't join him. All that was left was to sit there and stew in the bitter juices of her own misjudgment. She had been served a giant, steaming slice of humble pie, and it was clear from her expression that she was having a very hard time swallowing it. Uncle Robert, trying to salvage the rapidly sinking evening, quickly changed the subject. He started asking Alex detailed questions about crop rotation and hydroponics, his accountant's mind genuinely fascinated by the efficiency of Alex's operation. I joined in, asking Alex to tell him about the educational program they ran for local schools. We built a new conversation, one based on genuine interest and respect, and we built it right over the top of Tiffany's sullen silence. She sat there, trapped at the table, forced to listen to the man she'd belittled being treated as an honored guest. She picked at the tablecloth, her phone lying forgotten beside her plate. Her social media world, her 2 million followers, her curated perfection, none of it could help her here. In the real world, at this dinner table, she had been exposed as petty, ignorant, and shallow. After what felt like an eternity, she finally stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the wood floor. "You know what?" she announced, not looking at anyone. "I'm feeling a headache coming on. I should probably go." "Oh, so soon?" I asked, my voice dripping with faux concern. She shot me a look of pure venom, but her power was gone. It was like watching a defanged snake try to be intimidating. "Yes, I have an early start," she muttered. "Big campaign launching." She gathered her things and left without another word, not even saying goodbye to her own father. We all listened as the front door clicked shut, followed by the roar of her SUV's engine as she sped away into the night. The moment she was gone, the tension in the room dissipated completely. Uncle Robert let out a long sigh, as if he'd been holding his breath all night. He looked at me, then at Alex, and a genuine, sheepish smile touched his lips. "Well," he said, shaking his head, "that was something." Alex just smiled back. It was an eventful dinner. "Indeed," Uncle Robert said. He raised his water glass. "Alex, my boy, my apologies, and my congratulations. You're an impressive young man." We all clinked our glasses. It was a toast to the truth, to quiet success, and to a very, very satisfying serving of humble pie. The drive home was the polar opposite of the drive there. The earlier quiet had been filled with tension and apprehension. This new silence was light, buoyant, and filled with a shared, unspoken joy. We drove through the suburban streets and back toward the city lights, the folk music on the radio now sounding like a triumphant soundtrack. I leaned my head against the cool glass of the passenger window and watched the world slide by. I felt completely drained, but in the best possible way. The emotional armor I had put on earlier was gone, and I felt nothing but a profound sense of peace. After a few minutes, Alex reached over and took my hand, lacing his fingers through mine. "You okay?" he asked softly. "More than okay," I said, turning to look at him. His face was illuminated by the passing streetlights, and I was struck, not for the first time, by how much I loved him. "You were amazing tonight." He shrugged, a small smile on his face. "I didn't really do anything. Your uncle turned on the TV." "No, that's not what I mean," I said. "I mean the way you handled it, all of it. You were so calm and gracious, you never sank to her level. And then, I'm sorry if I went too far. When I started talking about our finances, I just snapped. Don't you dare apologize, he said, his voice firm. He squeezed my hand. That was the most incredible part of the whole night. Hearing you say all that, hearing you stand up for us, for me, that was better than any award, Michelle. Thank you. A warmth spread through my chest. He was right. I hadn't just been defending him, I'd been defending us. I'd been defending my own choices, my own happiness, my own definition of a successful life. When we got back to our apartment, the familiar comfort of our space felt like a sanctuary. I kicked off my shoes, and Alex loosened his tie. He walked over to the large window that overlooked our small rooftop greenhouse, the lights from the city glowing around it. You know, he said, looking out at the rows of sleeping plants. For a long time, I didn't talk about the money side of things because I didn't want people to get the wrong idea. I didn't want them to think the mission wasn't the most important part. He turned to face me. But tonight, I realized something. Maybe by hiding the success part, I was letting people like Tiffany write their own narrative. Maybe I was letting them believe that doing good and being successful are mutually exclusive. They're not. They're definitely not, I agreed, walking over to stand beside him. We stood there for a while, looking out at the city that he was working so hard to change. The anger and tension of the evening had melted away, leaving behind a hard, clear certainty. Our life was good. Our work had meaning. Our love was strong. And the opinions of people who couldn't see that were, as Alex had said, just noise. The next day, my phone buzzed with a text from Uncle Robert. It was a link to a major financial newspaper's online edition. The headline read, "The New Face of Philanthropy, How Social Enterprises like City Sprouts Are Revolutionizing Nonprofit Funding." There was a large, professional photo of Alex right at the top. The text below it simply said, "I'm very proud of you both. Talk soon." I never got a text from Tiffany. In fact, I didn't hear from her for months. The family grapevine, however, was ruthlessly efficient. I heard she had taken a spontaneous trip to Bali a few days after the dinner. Her Instagram posts were more frantic than usual, filled with desperate assertions of her own happiness and success. But something had changed. The comment sections were filled with questions from her followers about that amazing city farmer from her hometown. Someone had connected the dots. The story had leaked. Her carefully constructed brand of superiority had a permanent crack in it. The family dinners changed after that. They became quieter, more respectful. The judgment was gone, replaced by a cautious curiosity. Tiffany, when she finally started showing up again, was subdued. She never made eye contact with me or Alex if she could help it. The silence between us wasn't tense anymore. It was a settled fact, a permanent boundary. It was the after-dinner silence, a quiet that lingered long after the plates were cleared. A testament to the night the truth came on the evening news and changed everything.